On March 5th, heaven interrupts the ordinary rhythm of your life with an extraordinary declaration. This is not just another date on the calendar. This is not just another sunrise, another routine, another quiet prayer whispered into what feels like silence. On March 5th, God says your miracle is currently being loaded into your reality. You understand what that means. It means something has already been approved in heaven. It means a process has already begun. It means what you have been praying for, crying over, believing for, and even doubting at times is not forgotten. It is in motion. And Archangel Michael says 90% is complete. 90%. Let that sink into your spirit. You have been standing in the middle of what felt like delay, but heaven calls it development. You thought you were waiting, but God says your miracle has been forming piece by piece behind the scenes. While you were wondering if anything was happening, spiritual systems were aligning. Doors were being prepared. Obstacles were being removed. Protection was being assigned. Conversations you know nothing about were shifting in your favor. And now, on March 5th, the announcement comes. It is 90% complete. But here is the urgency in this message. Here is the part that should awaken your spirit. When something is 90% done, it means the majority of the battle is already won. Yet it also means you are entering the most delicate, most critical, most decisive phase. The last 10% is not small. It is not minor. It is the difference between almost and arrival. It is the difference between preparation and manifestation. It is the final stretch where many people grow tired, distracted, offended, or discouraged. And this is why the warning comes so clearly. Don't skip the last 10%. Why would God speak so precisely about percentages? Because this is about alignment. The loading process is not random. Think about when something loads into a system. It doesn't appear instantly. There's a process happening beneath the surface. Data is transferring. Structures are forming. Everything must reach full completion before it becomes visible and usable. If the process is interrupted at 90%, the result is incomplete. It may look close, but it is not fully operational. And spiritually, the same principle applies. You have endured the hardest parts. You survived the nights of confusion. You pushed through the silence. You kept believing when others doubted. You held on when it would have been easier to walk away. That with the 90%, it was the stretching, the refining, the strengthening. But the final 10% requires something different. It requires focus. It requires obedience. It requires spiritual alertness. Because this is the stage where subtle distractions appear. This is the stage where impatience whispers, "It's taking too long." This is the stage where compromise tries to offer you something smaller than what God promised. March 5th marks a spiritual checkpoint. It is a reminder that heaven has not abandoned the process. In fact, heaven is announcing progress. Archangel Michael's declaration that 90% is complete is not casual. It is protective. It is strategic. It is meant to wake you up before the finish line, not after you stepped away from it. So many people give up when they are closer than they realize. So many release their faith when the breakthrough is one step away. So many disconnect in the final moments because they mistake silence for absence. But this message is your interruption. It is your confirmation. It is your warning and your encouragement wrapped together. Your miracle is not hypothetical. It is not imaginary. It is not delayed beyond recovery. It is currently being loaded into your reality. The pieces are being assembled. The timing is being synchronized. The protection is active. The approval has already been spoken. And yet, you must understand this. The last 10% will test your consistency. It will test your mindset. It will test whether you truly believe what you have been praying for. Because when something is almost complete, the temptation is to relax too soon or to panic too soon. Both reactions can interrupt the process. God is saying, stay steady, stay anchored, stay aligned. This is why March 5th is not ordinary. It is a prophetic moment of awareness. It is the day you realize you are not starting from zero. You are not at 20%. You are not at 50%. You are standing at 90% completion. You are closer than you think. Closer than your emotions suggest. Closer than your circumstances reveal. Closer than the silence has made you believe. So hear this clearly. Do not disconnect now. Do not lose heart now. Do not abandon discipline now. The final 10% is sacred. It is the sealing phase. It is where endurance transforms into manifestation. And if you can hold your position just a little longer, if you can guard your spirit just a little more carefully, if you can trust just a little deeper, what has been loading invisibly will suddenly appear visibly. On March 5th, heaven announces progress, not postponement. Your miracle is loading. 90% is complete. And the next step you take may determine whether you witness the full arrival. Why is heaven speaking about this now? Why would God choose this exact moment to reveal that your miracle is 90% complete? Because timing in the Spirit is never random. When heaven releases a word, it is not for decoration. It is for direction. This message is not coming to you casually. It is coming because you are standing at a spiritual intersection. Something is about to shift, and before it does, God wants your heart steady and your focus sharpened. There are seasons when God is silent, and there are seasons when He speaks clearly to prepare you for acceleration. Right now is preparation for acceleration. You may have felt unusual pressure lately. You may have sensed resistance rising for no obvious reason. Small frustrations may have felt heavier than normal. Delays may have tested your patience more intensely. That is not coincidence. Often, when breakthrough is near, opposition increases. Not because you are failing, but because you are advancing. Heaven speaks now because fatigue is dangerous at 90%. When someone has been believing for a long time, the greatest temptation is not to quit at the beginning. It is to quit near the end. In the beginning, there is motivation. There is excitement. There is fresh faith. But near completion, there can be weariness. And weariness clouds judgment. It makes temporary discomfort feel permanent. It whispers that nothing is happening, even when everything is aligning. God is speaking now to interrupt that whisper. Behind the scenes, there is movement you cannot see. Alignments are taking place that your natural eyes cannot detect. Conversations are being orchestrated. Hearts are being softened. Resources are being positioned. Protection is being enforced. Archangel Michael's declaration that 90% is complete is not just an update. It is a warning against spiritual drift. It is heaven's way of saying, stay awake, stay aligned, stay faithful. This is also why the message feels urgent, because the final 10% requires cooperation. God initiates miracles, but He invites participation. The last stretch often demands obedience in small things. It may require you to guard your words more carefully. It may require you to forgive someone you thought you had already forgiven. It may require you to resist a distraction that looks harmless but is strategically timed. Heaven is speaking now, so you do not misinterpret these moments. There is another reason heaven is releasing this word now. Agreement multiplies power. When you hear a prophetic declaration and respond with faith, something activates in the spirit. Agreement is not passive. It is partnership. And when a community of believers aligns with a word at the same time, the atmosphere shifts. That is why this message must not stay hidden. If this word is confirming what you have been sensing, take a moment right now to like this video as a sign of agreement. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss the prophetic instructions that follow in this season. Share this message with someone who has been on the edge of giving up, because they may be standing at 90% and not even know it. And in the comments, declare boldly, "I will not quit at 90%. Your declaration is not just text on a screen. It is a statement in the spirit. Heaven is speaking now because distraction is subtle. The final phase of a miracle often looks ordinary. There may be no dramatic signs, no sudden fireworks, just daily life continuing as usual. And that normalcy can trick you into thinking nothing significant is happening. But the loading process does not need noise to be powerful. It needs completion. God knows the exact moment when your endurance is being tested most intensely. He knows when doubt tries to creep in quietly. He knows when disappointment tries to rewrite your expectations. And instead of waiting for you to stumble, He sends a word ahead of time. That is mercy. That is divine strategy. This is not about hype. This is about preparation. March 5th represents a checkpoint, but what happens before that day matters. Your mindset now matters. Your reactions now matter. Your discipline now matters. Heaven is speaking because the last 10% is forming under pressure, and pressure can neither refine you or distract you. You may feel like nothing has changed, but in the spirit, acceleration has already begun. The reason you feel tension is because transition is close. The reason the battle feels intense is because victory is near. The reason heaven is speaking now is because silence at this stage could cost you focus. So receive this as a timely interruption. Not to create fear, but to create awareness. Not to create anxiety, but to strengthen resolve. Your miracle is not an idea. It is a process nearing completion. 90% is done. And heaven refuses to let you disconnect before the final 10% seals what had been promised. The announcement is not early. It is not late. It is precise. And you are hearing it now because you are meant to finish strong. When God says your miracle is being loaded into your reality, He is revealing something deeper than timing. He is revealing process. Loading means transfer. It means movement from one realm into another. It means what has already been established in the spiritual dimension is now being transferred into your physical experience. And transfers require stability. They require alignment. They require completion. Think about this carefully. When something loads, you may not see the internal mechanics. You only see a progress indicator. You see a percentage rising. But behind that percentage, invisible systems are working. Data is organizing. Structures are locking into place. If the process is interrupted too soon, the result becomes corrupted. It may look complete, but it will not function correctly. That is why heaven is emphasizing 90%. Because 90% means the foundation is built, but the final integration is still occurring. Spiritually, the loading process is the alignment between promise and preparedness. God may declare something over your life long before you are ready to carry it. So the waiting season is not punishment. It is preparation. The delays were not denials. They were calibrations. Your character had to strengthen. Your faith had to mature. Your discernment had to sharpen. Every challenge you endured was building capacity so that when the miracle fully loads, you can sustain it. Archangel Michael's involvement in this season is not symbolic. It represents protection during transition. When something is transferring from the unseen into the seen, it becomes vulnerable to interference. The final phase is often when distractions increase, when misunderstandings arise, when sudden temptations appear. That is not random. It is because the completion phase is delicate. The enemy does not attack what is at 10%. He attacks what is at 90%. He waits until progress is undeniable and then tries to provoke impatience or doubt. The final 10% represents alignment, obedience, and endurance. It may not look dramatic. In fact, it may look like ordinary faithfulness. Waking up and praying when you feel tired. Speaking life when circumstances look unchanged. Refusing to entertain negativity. Continuing to act with integrity when compromise seems easier. These small acts are not small in heaven. They are sealing actions. They are confirmations that you are ready for what hath been prepared. Many people misunderstand this phase. They assume that once they have believed long enough, the rest will happen automatically. But the last 10% often tests consistency more than intensity. You do not need louder faith. You need steady faith. You do not need dramatic declarations. You need disciplined obedience. This is where miracles either finalize or stall. You may be wondering why the process feels slower now than it did before. That is because precision increases near completion. When a builder reaches the final stages of construction, measurements become exact. Details matter. Adjustments are refined. The same is true spiritually. God is aligning specific details in your life. Conversations must occur at the right time. Doors must open in sequence. Certain lessons must fully settle into your spirit. Nothing is random. Nothing is rushed. And here is something many do not realize. The final 10% often feels the quietest. There may be no visible signs, no dramatic confirmations, just silence. But silence does not mean inactivity. Silence often means focus. Heaven concentrates before manifestation. The stillness is not absence, it is synchronization. If you have felt an unusual mixture of anticipation and pressure, that is a sign you are in the loading phase. Anticipation because your spirit senses movement. Pressure because transition stretches you. This tension is not meant to break you. It is meant to position you. You are being aligned emotionally, mentally, and spiritually so that when the miracle appears, you recognize it and steward it correctly. Do not underestimate the importance of your thoughts in this phase. Negative thinking can interrupt alignment. Complaining can delay clarity. Impatience can create unnecessary detours. Guard your mind. Guard your words. What you speak during the last 10% either harmonizes with heaven or conflicts with it. Agreement accelerates. Doubt complicates. And here is the truth that many miss. Some people walk away at 90% because they mistake testing for termination. They assume that if pressure increased, something must have gone wrong. But often, pressure increases because something is about to go right. The final adjustments feel uncomfortable because they are stretching you into your next dimension. Hold on to this carefully. What I am about to reveal in the next part explains why so many believers lose their breakthrough in this exact stage. The pattern is not new, but it is rarely taught clearly. You will be glad you listened closely to what comes next. Before we move forward, seal this moment with a declaration. Type "I will finish strong" in the comments if this resonates with you. Lesson code 444 is now activated. And now, As this truth settles into your spirit, let me speak directly to those who feel the weight of this message. If this word is strengthening your faith and helping you understand the divine process unfolding in your life, this is not just content. It is a seed being planted in hearts across the world. When you sow into this mission through super thanks, membership, or a PayPal donation using the link in the description or the QR code on your screen, you are not giving to a channel. You are fueling a harvest of hope. God says, as you sow beside all waters, you will reap in due season. This is your moment to respond prophetically. When you step forward and say, I choose to help this word reach more souls, heaven records it as partnership and purpose. Your generosity becomes oil that keeps this light burning for someone who is one prayer away from breakthrough. Do not delay your obedience. Activate your seed and watch how God multiplies it back into your life. There is something uniquely fragile about being 90% complete. It is the stage where the promise feels close enough to taste, yet not close enough to hold. It is the place where anticipation and exhaustion collide. And spiritually, it is one of the most dangerous moments in the entire journey. Not because you are far from your miracle, but because you are so close to it. At 10%, people rarely quit. At 20%, they are still gathering momentum. Even at 50%, there is enough distance left to justify continued effort. But at 90%, something shifts internally. The mind begins to calculate. The heart begins to wonder why the final step is taking so long. Questions become louder. If I'm this close, why hasn't it happened yet? What if I misheard God? What if I misunderstood the promise? These thoughts do not scream, they whisper. And whispers are often more dangerous than shouts. The 90% stage exposes impatience. After enduring a long season of preparation, you naturally expect immediate manifestation. You think the final stretch should be quick and effortless. But often, the final stretch requires the greatest precision. The details matter more. The adjustments become finer. And this can feel frustrating because you have already invested so much faith, so much time, so much endurance. This is where discouragement tries to disguise itself as realism. It says, maybe you expected too much. It says, maybe you should lower your expectations. It suggests selling for something smaller, something here, something immediate instead of something eternal. That is the trap of 90%. The enemy does not need to destroy your faith completely. He only needs to reduce it slightly. He only needs you to compromise the last 10%. There is also a psychological element to this stage. When people are near completion, they sometimes self-sabotage. The pressure of finally receiving what they prayed for can feel overwhelming. Success brings responsibility. Breakthrough brings visibility. Elevation brings accountability. Subconsciously, some begin to fear the very thing they have been asking God for. So they delay themselves through doubt, distraction, or emotional withdrawal. Spiritually, the 90% mark is where testing intensifies. Not because God is cruel, but because completion requires confirmation. You have built strength throughout the journey, but the final stage proves whether that strength is stable. It is easy to declare faith when nothing is happening. It is harder to remain steady when everything feels like it is about to shift. Another danger of the 90% stage is comparison. You begin to look around and measure your progress against others. You see someone else's breakthrough and wonder why yours has not fully manifested yet. You start questioning timing. You start questioning fairness. But comparison clouds clarity. Your miracle has its own sequence, its own preparation, its own divine schedule. Looking sideways at someone else's journey can cause you to miss the final instruction meant specifically for you. At 90%, distractions also become more attractive. Opportunities that are almost good enough begin to appear. Shortcuts present themselves. Temporary relief becomes tempting. You may be offered something that resembles the promised but lacks its fullness. And if you are tired enough, you might accept it just to end the waiting. But partial blessings can interrupt complete ones. This is why discipline matters now more than ever. Your habits during the final 10% determine whether the process seals properly. Guard your routine of prayer. Guard your words. Guard your environment. What you expose yourself to during this stage influences your stability. If negativity surrounds you, it can magnify doubt. If impatience fills your conversations, it can weaken resolve. Protect your atmosphere. There is also the illusion of stagnation. When you are 90% complete, visible change may slow down. It can appear as though nothing is progressing. But internally, the most delicate integrations are happening. The foundation is being reinforced. The final connections are forming. Just because you cannot see dramatic movement does not mean advancement has stopped. Understand this clearly. The enemy's strategy at 90% is interruption. He wants you to react emotionally instead of responding spiritually. He wants you to interpret temporary discomfort as permanent delay. He wants you to step out of alignment right before completion. But you must recognize the pattern. Pressure at this stage is a sign of proximity. You are not being tested because you are unworthy. You are being tested because you are ready. You are not facing resistance because you are failing. You are facing resistance because you are advancing. The closer you get to manifestation, the more disciplined you must become. The more focused you must remain. The more intentional your faith must be. Do not let frustration write your story at 90%. Do not let impatience cancel what perseverance has built. This stage is dangerous only if you misunderstand it. If you recognize it for what it is, a confirmation of closeness, you can move through it with clarity instead of confusion. 90% complete does not mean almost lost. It means almost revealed. And if you can remain steady, if you can resist the subtle pull to settle, if you can guard your alignment just a little longer, the final 10% will not break you. It will launch you. When a miracle is 90% complete, there are signs. They are not always loud. They are not always dramatic. But they are real. And if you pay attention, you will notice that something has already shifted around you. The atmosphere begins to change before the manifestation appears. The ground trembles before the structure rises. And spiritually, the signs of formation often look different than what you expected. One of the first signs your miracle is already forming is increased resistance. This may sound surprising, but it is consistent with spiritual patterns. When nothing significant is happening, opposition is usually minimal. But when something powerful is nearing completion, pressure intensifies. You may notice arguments arising out of nowhere. Delays may suddenly feel heavier. Minor inconveniences may carry unusual emotional weight. This is not because you are regressing. It is because movement is happening in the unseen realm. Resistance often confirms proximity. Another sign is a subtle shift in your inner awareness. Even if your external circumstances look the same, something inside you feels different. There is a quiet knowing, a sense that change is near. You may not have physical evidence yet, but your spirit feels alert. It feels like standing at the edge of a doorway you cannot fully see through yet. That awareness is not imagination. It is alignment. You may also experience unusual dreams or repeated confirmations. Patterns begin to emerge. You hear similar messages from different sources. Scriptures seem to repeat themselves in your daily readings. Conversations unexpectedly echo themes you have been praying about. These repetitions are not coincidence. They are reinforcement. They are heaven's way of strengthening your focus during the final 10%. Another powerful sign is emotional pressure before elevation. When you are about to step into something greater, your capacity must expand. Expansion is uncomfortable. It stretches your patience. It stretches your thinking. It stretches your tolerance. You may feel moments of vulnerability or sensitivity. You may feel the weight of responsibility even before the blessing arrives. That emotional stretching is preparation. It is increasing your capacity to carry what is coming. Here is also what feels like divine silence. This is one of the most misunderstood signs of all. When miracles are forming, heaven sometimes becomes quieter. Not absent, not distant, but focused. The instructions become fewer. A reassurance becomes subtle. This silence can test your stability. You may feel like you are walking without constant confirmation. But silence at 90% is often a sign that the work is almost complete. The builder does not narrate every final adjustment. He concentrates. Pay attention to sudden clarity as well. Confusion that once clouded your thinking may begin to lift. Decisions that once felt complicated may now feel straightforward. You may sense a stronger conviction about what you need to release and what you need to hold on to. Clarity is a sign of alignment. It shows that the internal structure is stabilizing. You might also notice people shifting around you. Some relationships may naturally distance. Others may grow stronger. When you are approaching a new season, your environment adjusts. Not everyone can go with you into the next phase. Some connections were for preparation, not manifestation. This shift may feel bittersweet, but it is necessary. Your miracle requires the right atmosphere. Financial or practical tests may also appear. Small challenges that require trust can surface right before breakthrough. It might feel like one last push, one last test of endurance. Do not interpret this as regression. Often, the final examination confirms readiness. When you respond with faith instead of fear, you solidify the last 10%. Another sign is an increased desire for discipline. You may feel prompted to wake up earlier, to pray more intentionally, to organize your life, to clean up unfinished tasks. These urges are not random bursts of motivation. They are alignment signals. Your spirit senses that something significant is about to land, and it wants your environment prepared. You may also experience a deep craving for peace. Drama becomes less appealing. Chaos feels draining. You begin protecting your energy more carefully. That shift shows maturity. It shows that your focus is narrowing toward what truly matters. The final 10% requires a calm center, and your spirit knows it. Perhaps the most powerful sign is resilience. Despite everything, you are still standing. Despite moments of doubt, you are still believing. Despite delays, you have not fully surrendered your expectation. That endurance is evidence of formation. If the miracle were not near, the pressure might have already broken you. But you are still here. Still listening, still holding on. These signs may seem subtle, but together they form a pattern. Resistance, awareness, repetition, emotional stretch, silence, clarity, environmental shifts, final tests, discipline, peace, resilience. They all point to one reality. Something is forming. Something is stabilizing. Something is nearing completion. Do not dismiss these indicators. Do not reduce them to coincidence. When your miracle is 90% complete, The environment adjusts before the arrival. And if you recognize the signs, you will not panic during the pressure. You will understand it. You will move through it with confidence. Your miracle is not an abstract promise floating in the distance. It is a structure being finalized. It is a door being aligned with its frame. It is a shift that has already begun beneath the surface. And the signs around you are whispers of what is about to become visible. In a season where your miracle is 90% complete, protection becomes just as important as preparation. This is not the stage where you only need faith. This is the stage where you need reinforcement. And that is why the assignment of Archangel Michael is being highlighted so clearly in this message. His presence represents divine protection, spiritual enforcement, and heavenly authority activated over what God has already approved. When something is nearing completion, it becomes a target, not because it is weak, but because it is valuable. The closer you get to manifestation, the more visible your progress becomes in the spiritual realm, and visibility invites opposition. But here is the comfort. Heaven does not announce completion without assigning coverage. Archangel Michael's role in this season is not symbolic language meant to inspire emotion. It represents the reality that God defends what He designs. You may have noticed increased spiritual tension lately. Battles that feel larger than the situation itself. Reactions from others that seem disproportionate. Internal struggles that feel amplified. These are not random surges of difficulty. Often, they are signs that something significant is being guarded. When promotion is near, protection intensifies. When elevation is close, reinforcement surrounds you. Archangel Michael's assignment is about enforcement of boundaries. There are doors that must remain closed. There are influences that must be restrained. There are attacks that must be blocked before they ever reach you. Many times, you will never know what was prevented. You will never see the distraction that was diverted. You will never hear the conversation that was silenced. But protection does not require visibility to be effective. In the final 10%, your focus is crucial. And distraction is one of the primary strategies used against those nearing breakthrough. Distraction does not always look negative. Sometimes it looks like opportunity. Sometimes it looks like urgency. Sometimes it looks like emotional drama that demands your attention. But if your focus shifts at the wrong time, alignment can be delayed. Archangel Michael's assignment includes guarding your path so that unnecessary detours do not derail the completion process. There is also protection over your mind in this season. Thoughts can become intense when you are close to transition. Doubt may try to re-enter conversations you thought were already settled. Old fears may attempt to resurface. But protection in this phase includes mental reinforcement. The ability to recognize intrusive thoughts and refuse to entertain them is not accidental. It is strengthened awareness. You may feel a deeper urge to withdraw from chaos, a stronger desire to protect your peace, a clearer sense of what conversations to avoid. A discernment is part of divine covering. When heaven is guarding your next level, your sensitivity increases. You begin to sense when something feels misaligned. You begin to recognize subtle shifts in atmosphere. This is not paranoia. It is preparation. Archangel Michael's assignment also includes courage. Protection is not just about defense. It is about empowerment. You are not meant to hide during the last 10%. You are meant to stand confidently. Courage becomes necessary because the final phase may require bold obedience. You may need to speak when it feels uncomfortable. You may need to act when others hesitate. Protection gives you the stability to move forward without fear. Understand this clearly. Protection does not remove pressure. It regulates it. You may still feel challenges. You may still encounter resistance. But the difference is that it will not overwhelm you. It will not destroy what God has built. It will not undo the 90% that is already complete. There is a boundary around your progress. Another critical part of this assignment is timing. When something is nearing manifestation, timing becomes precise. Moving too early can disrupt the sequence. Moving too late can delay momentum. Protection includes divine pacing. You may feel restrained from certain decisions. You may sense a pause even when you are eager to move. That restraint is not stagnation. It is synchronization. There is also protection over relationships in this season. Not everyone who smiles at you understands your calling. Not everyone who advises you sees what God has shown you. In the final 10%, clarity about who to trust becomes sharper. You may find yourself pulling back from certain voices and leaning closer to others. This recalibration is guided. You are not navigating this stage alone. The message that 90% is complete comes with reinforcement attached. Heaven does not celebrate progress and then leave you unguarded. The assignment of Archangel Michael in this season is a declaration that what God has initiated will not be easily interrupted. So do not interpret increased spiritual intensity as abandonment. Do not assume that challenges mean vulnerability. Often, they mean value, and valuable things are guarded carefully. Your miracle is valuable. Your calling is valuable. Your obedience in this final 10% is valuable. Stand firm. Stay alert. Move with discernment. Protection is active. Boundaries are enforced. And what is nearing completion is being watched over with authority. There is a reason heaven keeps repeating the warning. Do not skip the last 10%. Because the cost of skipping it is greater than most people realize. When something is 90% complete, it feels close enough to relax. It feels safe enough to assume the rest will happen automatically. But spiritually, the final stretch is not automatic. It is intentional. And if you disconnect now, you risk delaying what was already within reach. Skipping the last 10% does not always look dramatic. It rarely looks like outright rebellion. More often, it looks like subtle compromise. It looks like lowering your standards just a little. It looks like letting your prayer life weaken because you assume the heavy lifting is over. It looks like speaking carelessly because you believe the outcome is secured. These small shifts may seem harmless, but in the final stage, precision matters. The last 10% is where endurance proves authenticity. You have already invested faith, time, and obedience. But the final stretch tests whether you can remain consistent without constant reassurance. It tests whether your faith is dependent on visible signs or anchored in trust. If you skip this phase emotionally, you may still arrive at something, but it may not be the fullness of what was intended. Impatience is one of the greatest dangers here. After carrying hope for so long, you naturally want relief. You want the waiting to end. And impatience can push you to force outcomes. It can tempt you to make decisions prematurely. It can lead you to accept substitutes because they are available now instead of waiting for what is aligned. But forced doors rarely carry long-term peace. Another cost of skipping the last 10% is settling for less than God's best. When you are tired, almost can feel good enough. Almost healed, almost restored, almost successful, almost recognized. But almost is not completion. Almost still leaves gaps. Almost still carries instability. If you abandon the process now, you may find yourself revisiting the same lessons later because they were never fully sealed. There is also the cost of missed instruction. In the final stage, guidance may become very specific. A small adjustment, a final act of obedience, a conversation you must have, a boundary you must enforce. If you disengage spiritually, you may overlook that instruction, and that overlooked detail can delay manifestation. Not because God withdrew the promise, but because alignment requires attentiveness. Skipping the last 10% can also affect your confidence. If you walk away too soon and realize later how close you were, regret can become heavy. You may question your discernment. You may struggle to trust your timing in the future. But when you finish strong, even through discomfort, your confidence deepens. You gain evidence of your resilience. You strengthen your spiritual maturity. Distraction is another hidden cost. At 90%, distractions often appear appealing. They promise relief. They promise escape from pressure. But distractions divide focus, and divided focus weakens precision. The final 10% requires clarity. It requires guarding your time, your energy, your attention. If you scatter yourself now, you risk slowing the completion process. There is also the emotional cost of discouragement. When you misinterpret the quietness of this phase as stagnation, you may emotionally withdraw. You may reduce your expectation to protect yourself from disappointment. But lowering expectation does not protect you. It restricts you. The final 10% often feels quiet because synchronization is happening. Do not let silence convince you that progress has stopped. Skipping this stage can also impact others connected to your breakthrough. Your miracle is not isolated. It affects family, community, and purpose. If you compromise now, you may delay not only your blessing but the ripple effect it carries. The promotion you are waiting for may open doors for others. The healing you are believing for may inspire someone else's faith. The provision you are trusting for may fund a greater mission. The last 10% is bigger than you realize. And perhaps the greatest cost of all is momentum. You have built spiritual strength through every trial. You have developed endurance through every delay. If you quit now, you interrupt the momentum you worked so hard to build. But if you press through, that momentum carries you into the next season with power. The final 10% is not about proving something to God. It is about solidifying something within you. It is about sealing the lessons, strengthening the discipline, confirming the alignment. It is about showing that your faith is not temporary enthusiasm, but sustained conviction. You are not this far by accident. You did not endure everything just to step away before completion. The pressure you feel is evidence of proximity, not punishment. And the cost of quitting now is far greater than the discomfort of continuing. Do not trade long-term manifestation for short-term relief. Do not exchange full completion for partial comfort. The last 10% may be quiet, but it is critical. And if you remain steady, if you guard your alignment, if you resist the temptation to settle, you will not just arrive. You will arrive complete. The final 10% is not about striving harder. It is about aligning deeper. When something is 90% complete, the foundation has already been laid. The structure is standing. The promise hath been spoken. But the last stretch determines whether the miracle integrates fully into your life or remains partially formed. And what this stage requires from you is different from what the earlier stages demanded. The first requirement of the final 10% is steady faith when there is no visible evidence. Earlier in the journey, you may have received signs, confirmations, encouragement from others. But now, it may feel quieter. The confirmations may not be as frequent. The emotions may not be as intense. This is intentional. Steady faith is not built on constant reassurance. It is built on internal conviction. Can you continue believing when the atmosphere feels ordinary? Can you remain confident when the environment looks unchanged? That stability seals the process. The second requirement is radical obedience in small things. The final 10% is often secured through details. A conversation you have been avoiding. A habit you need to correct. A boundary you must reinforce. A step you must take even if it feels uncomfortable. These instructions may seem minor compared to the magnitude of your miracle, but they are not minor in heaven's system. Small obedience unlocks large transition. Guarding your thoughts is another crucial requirement. At 90%, the mind becomes a battlefield. Doubt may try to reintroduce itself quietly. Old disappointments may resurface to remind you of past delays. Negative scenarios may attempt to project fear into your future. You must become intentional about your mental atmosphere. Replace speculation with declaration. Replace fear with trust. Replace overthinking with surrender. Your thoughts either cooperate with the loading process or interfere with it. Gratitude before arrival is another powerful key. It is easy to be thankful after manifestation, but the final 10% asks for gratitude in advance. Gratitude signals trust. It tells heaven that you believe what has been prepared will arrive at the appointed time. When you thank God before you see the outcome, you align your spirit with completion instead of lack. Gratitude stabilizes expectation. Discipline is also required. The final stage often tempts you to relax prematurely. You may think, I've already done enough. But consistency is what seals breakthroughs. Maintain your prayer life. Maintain your focus. Maintain your integrity. Do not reduce your spiritual investment simply because you feel close to the finish line. The final steps are just as important as the first ones. Another requirement is emotional maturity. The last 10% may stretch your patience. It may test your reactions. Unexpected situations may arise that challenge your composure. Responding with calm instead of frustration is part of alignment. The way you handle pressure now prepares you for the level you are stepping into. Elevation requires stability. You must also guard your environment carefully. Not everyone will understand what you sense. Some may question your confidence. Others may project their doubts onto you. In this stage, selective exposure is wisdom. Surround yourself with voices that strengthen faith, not weaken it. Protect your peace. Protect your focus. The final 10% thrives in clarity, not chaos. Here is also a requirement of surrender. This may sound surprising because you have already surrendered so much. But this surrender is deeper. It is releasing the need to control the exact timing. It is trusting that God's synchronization is more precise than your urgency. When you release control, you remove internal resistance. You allow the final pieces to align naturally. And here is something many overlook. The final 10% requires you to see yourself as ready. Sometimes the only thing delaying manifestation is your own perception of unworthiness. You may subconsciously feel unprepared for what you prayed for. But if God has brought you to 90%, He has already developed you. Stop disqualifying yourself in the last stretch. Accept that you are being prepared because you are capable. Hold this carefully. What I am about to reveal in the next part will show you how to activate full agreement with heaven so the final 10% locks into place with power. The key is simpler than you think, but it requires intentional action. You will be grateful you positioned your heart for what is coming next. Before we move forward, seal your alignment. Type I receive my final 10% in the comments if this resonates with you. Blessing code 909 is now activated. And as this truth settles into your spirit, understand this moment is larger than a single message. When you choose to support this mission through super thanks, membership, or a PayPal donation using the link in the description or the QR code appearing on your screen, you are sowing into fertile ground. Scripture declares that when you sow generously, you reap abundantly, and this is living soil where faith is rising daily. I feel led to say this clearly. I am inviting you to become a carrier of this word. Your seed becomes oil that keeps this prophetic light burning for someone who is standing at their own 90%. As you release your offering, heaven releases provision back into your life, pressed down and overflowing. This is not a transaction. It is a spiritual alignment. Step into obedience now and let your giving become part of someone else's breakthrough. When your miracle is 90% complete, agreement becomes the activation key. Heaven has already initiated the process. Protection has already been assigned. Preparation has already taken place. But the final 10% requires alignment between what God has declared and what you are declaring. Agreement is not passive belief. It is active participation. It is when your words, your thoughts, and your actions echo what heaven has already spoken. Many people misunderstand agreement. They think it simply means saying, "I believe." But true agreement is deeper. It is choosing to speak in alignment even when circumstances suggest otherwise. It is refusing to let temporary appearances override eternal promises. When God says your miracle is loading, agreement means you stop speaking as if it is absent. You stop narrating your life through the lens of delay. Instead, you begin to speak as someone who is 90% complete. Your words carry creative power. And the final 10%, your language matters more than ever. Complaints can introduce resistance. Outfilled conversations can slow momentum. Negative declarations can create unnecessary detours. But when you speak life, when you declare trust, when you affirm that completion is near, you harmonize with the process instead of conflicting with it. Agreement also shows up in praise. Praise is not reserved for after the miracle appears. Praise is a weapon during formation. When you choose gratitude before manifestation, you signal unshakable trust. Praise shifts your internal atmosphere. It silences anxiety. It weakens fear. It reminds your spirit that God's track record is faithful. In the final 10%, praise is not emotional hype. It is spiritual strategy. Another dimension of agreement is obedience without delay. If God prompts you to act, act. If He nudges you to release something, release it. If He instructs you to step forward, move. Delayed obedience can create friction. Immediate obedience keeps the path clear. The final stage of a miracle often includes small but significant steps. Agreement means you respond quickly and confidently. Community agreement is powerful as well. When multiple voices align with a prophetic declaration, momentum increases. That is why engagement matters in this moment. If this message confirms what you are sensing, do not remain silent. Like this video as an act of visible agreement. Subscribe if you have not already, so you stay connected to the guidance unfolding in this season. Share this word with someone who feels stuck at 90% and needs clarity. And in the comments, declare boldly, "I agree with heaven." Your written declaration is not casual interaction. It is alignment in action. Agreement also requires guarding your internal dialogue. What do you say to yourself when no one else is listening? Do you rehearse fears or do you rehearse promises? The final 10% can amplify internal conversations. You must become intentional about redirecting them. When doubt whispers, answer with truth. When impatience rises, respond with surrender. Agreement is often quiet and personal before it becomes public and visible. There is also an element of expectancy. Agreement means you prepare as if manifestation is certain. You organize your life as if the door is about to open. You clean up unfinished areas. You position yourself mentally and practically. Expectancy demonstrates belief. It says, I am not just hoping. I'm preparing. Understand this clearly. Agreement accelerates clarity. When you align fully with what God has spoken, confusion begins to dissolve. Decisions become sharper. Distractions lose their appeal. Fear loses its volume. The final 10% thrives in unified direction. Divided thoughts create divided results. But unified agreement creates flow. You may feel moments where doubt tries to re-enter. That does not mean you lack faith. It means you are human. Agreement does not mean you never feel uncertainty. It means you choose alignment despite it. Every time you redirect your focus back to trust, you strengthen the completion process. There is a spiritual crossover that happens when agreement becomes consistent. The invisible begins to feel tangible. The weight of waiting transforms into anticipation. The pressure shifts into momentum. You begin to sense that something is about to break open. That is not imagination. That is alignment reaching full synchronization. Do not underestimate this stage. Many people reach 90% but never activate full agreement. They believe privately but speak negatively publicly. They pray intensely but complain casually. A divided posture weakens completion. But when your spirit, your words, and your actions unite, the final 10% locks into place. You are not waiting for God to move. He has already moved. You are aligning with what is in motion. Agreement is your response to divine progress. And when you activate it fully, you will notice a shift. The atmosphere will feel lighter. Your confidence will feel steadier. The silence will feel purposeful instead of empty. The final 10% is not about striving harder. It is about aligning completely. Speak in agreement. Act in agreement. Praise in agreement. And watch how what had been loading invisibly begins to manifest visibly. Here is a pattern that repeats itself throughout every major breakthrough. Before the testimony comes the testing. Before the celebration comes the pressure. Before the visible reward comes the invisible refinement. And when your miracle is 90% complete, the testing can feel more intense than anything you experienced at the beginning. This is where many people become confused. They assume that if manifestation is near, life should suddenly feel easier. They expect calm skies right before arrival. But often, the opposite happens. The final stretch can feel heavier. The challenges can appear sharper. Emotions can feel heightened. Not because the miracle is retreating, but because it is solidifying. Testing is not punishment. It is confirmation. It confirms that what hath been built in you can sustain what is about to be placed upon you. If your miracle involves elevation, then your character must be elevated. If your miracle involves influence, then your integrity must be strengthened. If your miracle involves increase, then your discipline must be proven stable. The final 10% tests these foundations. Sometimes the testing comes through delay. You expected something to shift by now, but it hasn't. You feel the tension between promise and timing. The tension reveals what you truly believe. Do you trust God's precision, or do you trust your schedule? Delay in this phase often exposes hidden impatience. And when impatience surfaces, you are given the opportunity to surrender it. Other times, the testing comes through distraction. Opportunities may appear that seem good but are not aligned. Conversations may draw you into unnecessary conflict. Emotional triggers may tempt you to react instead of respond. These distractions are subtle examinations of focus. Can you stay centered? Can you resist what is merely urgent in order to protect what is eternal? There is also testing through opposition. When something significant is about to manifest, resistance may intensify. Criticism may increase. Doubt from others may grow louder. You may even question yourself in moments of exhaustion. But opposition does not mean retreat. It often means advancement. The closer you get to the door, the more resistance you may feel pushing against it. Testing before testimony refines your responses. It reveals whether your faith is situational or foundational. Situational faith rises when circumstances are favorable and shrinks when they are not. Foundational faith remains steady regardless of visible progress. The final 10% strengthens foundational faith. It anchors you in trust beyond emotion. You may also experience internal testing. Old fears may resurface briefly. Memories of past disappointments may try to replay themselves. Thoughts may ask, what if it doesn't happen this time? These moments are not proof of weakness. They are opportunities to choose trust again. Every time you choose trust, you reinforce the structure of your miracle. Pressure in this phase produces power. Just as muscles grow stronger under resistance, your spiritual endurance deepens under testing. Without resistance, there is no expansion. Without testing, there is no testimony. The weight you feel now is preparing you to carry what is coming without collapsing under it. Refinement is part of this process. Testing burns away unnecessary habits. It exposes attitudes that need adjustment. It highlights areas where humility must grow. This refinement may feel uncomfortable, but it is purposeful. God is not just interested in giving you a miracle. He is interested in preparing you to maintain it. Understand this clearly. The testing will not last forever. It is not meant to break you. It is meant to finalize you. When gold is refined, the heat increases before purity is revealed. The increase in heat is not destruction. It is transformation. Likewise, the intensity you feel now is shaping you for manifestation. The testimony that follows this stage will not simply be about what you received. It will be about who you became during the process. You will look back and realize that the testing strengthened your patience. It sharpened your discernment. It matured your faith. It solidified your identity. Without the testing, the testimony would be incomplete. Do not misinterpret the pressure. Do not assume that difficulty means delay. Often, testing increases precisely because completion is near. The final 10% is not smooth because it is strengthening you for sustainability. God is not rushing this phase because He values longevity over speed. You are not being tested because you are failing. You are being tested because you are trusted. Trusted with greater responsibility. Trusted with greater impact. Trusted with a miracle that requires maturity. So when pressure rises, respond with stability. When doubt whispers, answer with declaration. When distraction calls, choose focus. The testing before the testimony is not your enemy. It is your preparation. And when the testimony finally unfolds, you will understand why the last 10% felt heavier. It was shaping you into someone capable of carrying the fullness of what God promised. March 5th is not simply a date marked by numbers. It is a spiritual intersection. It is a crossover point where what has been forming quietly begins to move with visible momentum. When God declares that your miracle is 90% complete and that it is currently being loaded into your reality, March 5th represents a shift from preparation into activation. Spiritually, this day functions like a release point. For weeks, months, maybe even years, alignment has been building beneath the surface. Lessons have been learned. Character has been refined. Patience has been stretched. Protection has been assigned. Now, March 5th signals that the unseen structure is stabilizing enough to support manifestation. It is not necessarily the day everything appears instantly, but it is the day acceleration becomes undeniable. There is a difference between movement and acceleration. Movement can be slow and almost unnoticeable. Acceleration, however, carries momentum. On March 5th, you may begin to sense an internal shift first, a clarity that feels stronger than before, a confidence that does not depend on circumstances, a peace that overrides previous anxiety. This internal shift is often the first evidence that the loading process is nearing completion. Spiritually, this date represents divine synchronization. Pieces that once felt disconnected begin to align. Conversations fall into place. Opportunities surface at the right moment. Ideas that once seemed distant suddenly feel practical and actionable. Synchronization is heaven's signature. When God moves, details align with precision. March 5th can also mark the lifting of resistance. You may have felt heavy pressure leading up to this point. Obstacles may have seemed persistent, but as the final 10% seals, certain struggles lose their intensity. It may not happen dramatically. It may feel subtle, but you will notice that what once strained you no longer holds the same weight. That is not coincidence. That is completion settling into place. This day may also bring revelation. Insights that were previously unclear can suddenly become obvious. You may understand why certain delays occurred. You may recognize how specific challenges shaped you. Revelation often arrives when the lesson has been fully absorbed. March 5th can be a moment of spiritual clarity where confusion gives way to understanding. There is also an element of divine confirmation attached to this date. You may receive unexpected encouragement, a message, a conversation, a sign that reinforces what has been spoken over you. Confirmation strengthens confidence. It reassures you that what you sensed internally is now aligning externally. Acceleration does not always mean chaos. Sometimes it feels like doors opening smoothly instead of forcefully. Instead of striving, you may experience flow. Instead of pushing, you may experience positioning. When something is fully loaded, it does not struggle to appear. It integrates naturally into your life. However, it is important to remain grounded. March 5th is a shift point, not a finish line. The activation of momentum requires stewardship. If clarity increases, protect it. If opportunity appears, approach it with wisdom. If peace settles in, guard it. The spiritual shift must be handled with maturity. You may also sense a renewed sense of purpose. The waiting season often feels uncertain, but acceleration clarifies direction. What once seemed distant now feels reachable. What once felt abstract now feels tangible. This renewed purpose is evidence that the transition is real. Understand that spiritual crossovers are rarely random. They are the result of cumulative obedience. Every prayer you prayed, every moment you chose faith over fear, every time you resisted compromise, all of it contributed to this shift. March 5th is not isolated from your past. It is connected to every act of perseverance that brought you here. You may notice that your reactions change as well. Situations that once triggered frustration may now produce calm. People who once intimidated you may no longer hold emotional power over you. That inner stability reflects outer readiness. When your internal world aligns, your external world follows. March 5th also represents visibility. What was hidden begins to emerge. Not all at once, perhaps, but enough to confirm that the loading process has reached its final phase. You may see evidence that something has shifted behind the scenes. Conversations that once stalled begin moving. Opportunities that once seemed blocked become accessible. This is the crossover from waiting to receiving. Not necessarily receiving everything instantly, but stepping into a new rhythm where manifestation feels closer than ever before. The tension of uncertainty begins to dissolve. Expectation transforms into anticipation. Stay alert. Stay grateful. Stay aligned. Because when a spiritual shift occurs, it must be recognized to be fully embraced. March 5th is not about hype. It is about transition. It is the moment when the invisible edges into the visible. When preparation meets opportunity. When alignment meets acceleration. And as this day unfolds, remember, you did not arrive here by accident. You endured the 90%. You protected the final 10%. Now you stand at a threshold. And what happens next will reflect everything that has been built within you. This is the moment everything has been pointing toward. The waiting, the stretching, the silence, the resistance, the refinement. It was never wasted. It was building toward completion. And now, as we stand at the threshold of March 5th, you must understand something with absolute clarity. God does not abandon what He has brought to 90%. He finishes where He starts. Your miracle arriving may not look like fireworks in the sky. It may not come with dramatic announcements. Sometimes arrival feels like a quiet door opening, a phone call, a shift in atmosphere, a burden lifting, a confirmation settling deeply in your spirit. Completion often feels peaceful, not chaotic, certain, not frantic, stable, not rushed. You have been conditioned through this journey. The early stages build your endurance. The middle stages refined your character. The final 10% strengthened your alignment. Now, arrival is not just about receiving something external. It is about becoming someone internal who can sustain it. Completion is not random. It is the natural outcome of alignment. When your faith stayed steady, when your obedience remained consistent, when your agreement with heaven became intentional, you positioned yourself for manifestation. And manifestation is not magic. It is alignment reaching fulfillment. You may notice that when your miracle arrives, it feels both new and familiar at the same time. New because you are stepping into something fresh. Familiar because your spirit has already rehearsed this moment through faith. You prepared for it. You spoke about it. You believed in it. And now it integrates into your life as something you are ready to steward. There may be a temptation to look back at the difficulty and feel resentment. But instead, see it through the lens of gratitude. The delay strengthened you. The testing matured you. The pressure clarified you. Without those seasons, you would not fully appreciate this one. Completion tastes sweeter when you understand the cost of perseverance. As your miracle arrives, humility must remain your anchor. Do not forget who carried you through the silent nights. Do not forget who protected you when resistance increased. Do not forget who spoke over you when doubt tried to overwhelm you. The same God who began the process is the one who completes it. You may also realize that arrival does not mean the end of growth. It means the beginning of a new level. Every completed miracle becomes the foundation for the next assignment. But now you move forward with evidence. Evidence that God is faithful. Evidence that 90% was never the end. Evidence that the final 10% was worth protecting. For some of you, the miracle arriving will be internal. A peace you have not felt in years. A freedom from anxiety. a restored confidence. For others, it will be external, a door opening, a relationship healing, a financial breakthrough, a long-awaited opportunity materializing. However it appears, recognize it. Do not dismiss it because it looks different than expected. Completion often arrives in forms that exceed imagination. And if you are still standing in anticipation, remember this: arrival sometimes unfolds in layers. The first sign is confirmation. The second sign is opportunity. The third sign is full manifestation. Do not rush the layers. Celebrate each one, because each layer proves that the process is active and alive. Lift your perspective higher now. You are not someone who always made it. You are not someone who stopped at 90%. You are someone who endured the final stretch. Someone who guarded their alignment. Someone who chose agreement over doubt. That identity matters, because the next time you face a season of waiting, you will remember this one. Let this truth settle into your spirit. What God completes cannot be undone by temporary opposition. What He establishes cannot be erased by momentary fear. What He releases into your life carries His signature, and His signature carries authority. So stand in gratitude. Stand in confidence. Stand in peace. The miracle that was loading is integrating. The breakthrough that felt distant is arriving. The silence that once confused you now makes sense. You are not behind. You were being built. Before we close, seal this season with faith. Type IT is complete in the comments if this message resonates with you. Blessing code 1212 is now activated. And as this journey comes full circle, hear this final assurance. You are seen. You are guided. You are protected. The same God who carried you through the 90% will sustain you beyond it. What began as a promise is becoming reality. What felt delayed is now aligned. What was loading is now living in your world. Your miracle arrives not by accident, but by divine completion.